Crimes of rape and happened during genocide possesses systematic mass rape, forced maternity rape as a means of murder, and sexual torture, gang rape, coerced kicks between family members, sexual mutilation, forced prostitution, sexual slavery, rape in rape camps, women forced to marry genocidaires, and so forth. Gender, as Forgery writes, they shape genocide from start to finish. The gender question in genocide goes well beyond the experience of women and girls. The perpetration of gender-based crimes against both men and women, or even the comparative study of the experience of men and women. Rather, it involves examining the network of gender relationships that go into creating groups and how ideas about creative power inform and relative violence. There is a great need for research in this area and rich opportunity for it, because each genocide is likely to be driven by different assumptions about gender. More recently, the crime of rape has again forced a rethinking of gender and criminal law, this time in the arena of international law against genocide and war crimes. This change was linked to what Nicola Henry refers to as victim movement in international justice, a new phase in international humanitarian law characterized by attention to victims of atrocity crimes. After the Holocaust, the International Military Tribunal in Nuremberg relied largely on documents rather than victim testimony. In addition to the absence of victim from justice process, discussions of gender and women were also missing. The charter of the tribunal made no mention of sexual violence, leaving out discussions of the reproductive experiment and forced sterilization to which many women were subjected. Nuremberg's successor, the International Military Tribunal for the Far East, better known as the Tokyo Tribunal, did a better job at addressing sexual violence. It prosecuted the rape of Nanking as an aggressive act of war that had included approximately 2,000 cases of rape. But the Tokyo Tribunal was still selective in its inclusion of gender-based crimes, ignoring the sexual slavery of thousands of convert women. In the criminal tribunals for the former Yugoslavia and Rwanda, however, survivors of sexual violence were included in international war crimes trial for the first time. The International Criminal Tribunal for Yugoslavia and the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda assisted in shifting the view of sexual violence from an inevitable byproduct of war to a weapon of war. The UN Genocide Convention mentions neither sex nor gender, categories not yet recognized as legally relevant to genocide at the time it was formulated. Rather, it defines genocide as acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. And first, we should start including gender in all studies of genocide. No human event occurs in gender-free environment, and recent research indicates that gender plays a central role in many of these extreme human events. Research focused on gender may lead to a redefinition of genocide, and gender research may also lead us to rethink our assumptions about when genocides begin and end. If they begin with the rapes to still girls and women and end with the enslavement of women and children, then how should we calculate their beginnings and endings? Has the Rwandan genocide ended, or will it end when the last woman deliberately infected with AIDS during rape has died, or when the last child born of Hutu rape dies? Many scholars argue that definitions that focus too much on massacre, mass bodies, mass graves, distinct moments of mass murder, erase almost completely the history and experience of women victims and therefore extract deeper and more penetrating understanding of the crime. Genocide research that includes gender may also lead us to recalculate our counts of victims. As Helen Farr pointed out, acts that do not result in death have not been taken seriously in estimating the toll of victims by students of genocide. And by including gender in our analysis, we will become more sensitive to the gender constructions of post-genocidal societies. In studying genocide, we need to better understand the gender enactments of men as well as women, perpetrators as well as victims, and this will vary from group to group. And then, we need to re-examine histories of genocide in light of gender. Roger Smith and Helen Farr both assumed that historically genocide had followed the patterns of kill the men and rape and assimilate the women and children, although both also noted that the pattern seemed to be changing. To conclude, in the years ahead, examining genocide from the perspective of gender is likely to transform genocide studies and even genocide prosecutions. It will force a redefinition of genocide and perhaps a formal revision of the UN Convention on Genocide. And we will have to rethink how we date the termination of genocide. Perhaps we will learn why men are chief perpetrators, how perpetrators pick their victims, and how their tools of destruction are gendered. We may have to rewrite the history of genocide. The list could go on, but I think it is clear that gender analysis has the power to radically revamp the study and prosecutions of genocide. It had been crucial, of course, to unearth men as gender subject too, for equality, in order to fully understand the complex ways in which gender informs the genocidal process. Of particular importance has been Adam Jones' work on the ways in which men, especially civilian men of battle age, are victimized in times of genocide. In root and branch genocides, they are often the first group to be separated out and massacred, paving the way for the murder of women, children, and elderly men. In more common articulations of genocide, however, they can be only groups slated for outright massacre, while women, children, and elderly men suffer a range of alternative fates involving rape, sexual exploitation, torture, forced maternity, murder, or expulsion. Moreover, these actions tend to lead to definition of genocide that prioritize the strictly murderous dimension, usually understood as outright massacre above all else. The gender study of genocide, therefore, involves considering the simultaneous operations of gender within several different layers that contribute to the perpetration of the crime. These layers include the gender concept, through which perpetrators understand power, the gender ways in which they define both their own group and the groups they are targeting, the gender dynamics that organize the economic, political, social, and familial spheres within perpetrator and victim societies, the gender strategies pursued in the course of group destruction, the influence of gender on conceptions of self and on experience of conflict among perpetrators, victims, bystanders, and witnesses, the gendered nature of international representations and the responses to the conflict, to use of gender in propaganda and in denial strategies, the gendered infection of justice systems, and so forth. With the exception of extensive studies on the Holocaust, most of these topics have yet to be received in great detail, and I hope that our conference will contribute to it. As some perpetrators seem to know, when female victims are sexual violations extend well beyond the genocide. The long-term physical, psychological, and socio-political effects of wartime rape are well known, though still in need of further study, particularly in terms of remediation. This is especially true with regard to where we decide to locate the end of the crime in our narratives. And this is important to answer the question when genocide ends. And genocide scholars know that we don't like speaking about Armenian genocide as post-genocidal period. It is better to say genocide and aftermath because many genocide scholars think that Armenian genocide is still denied, and this is the meaning. This means that genocide is continuing. To include women's experiences in our definition of genocide is to recognize something that the perpetrators of genocide have known for centuries, that one can destroy a group by destroying that group's ability to reproduce. What this means in each instance will differ according to the perpetrator's specific beliefs regarding reproduction and the way in which they define their target group. The social aspect of genocide thus takes on an added importance when we consider in particular the way that so many women victims have experienced. Definitions that include concepts like social death and interdiction of the biological and social reproduction of members, Helen Fine incorporates, in my opinion, the ground-level realities of this crime for men and women, boys and girls, individuals, families, and collectivities much more effectively than those definitions that get caught up in the numbers and the identities of those killed. They come closer to capturing what this crime essentially is, and arguably remain, as Martin Shaw has argued, more true to the spirit of the 1948 United Nations Convention of the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide and the work of Raphael Lemkin. The key to understanding how gender violence and life force atrocities work together in a genocidal strategy is, of course, to examine how they contribute to the destruction of the group as such. For many genocide researchers, the Armenian genocide is, as Horvath puts it, the essential prototype of genocide in the 20th century. For many scholars, it is the first time a regime trying to transform a multi-ethnic empire into a sovereign nation-state employed modern technological means to deport and destroy ethnic communities as part of a modernization program, as Akçam puts it. The Armenian genocide was a set of processes consisting of elite homicides, deportations, massacres, forced assimilations, destructions of material culture, and expropriation of property. These different dimensions of the genocide demonstrate the official effort to rid the empire of its Christian subjects. The policy of forcible assimilation was an element of the Armenian genocide, and the government of the Committee of Union and Progress applied a systematic policy to first forcibly convert boys and girls into Islam, and then through placing into orphanages or distributing to Muslim families, dissolves them within the Muslim majority. Moreover, the government created a special mechanism which Taner Akçam defined as a program to encourage assimilation. Instead, the families where the Armenian boys and girls would be placed into were recognized as their heirs. The practice of destroying communities in combination with the rape, abduction, and trafficking of women has a long history in the region, which goes back to the Ottoman, very ancient times. Traditional society in the Middle East still looked upon women and children as chattel, persons lacking political personality and transmutable ethnic identity. The cultural values of children and females could be erased or, as they think, reprogrammed. So genetic continuity was a male proposition, and in the society and a time where the more or less rudimentary concept of race, nation, ethnicity, and culture were so closely linked to the concept of religion, it made sense to many that one could change race by changing religion. What had to be formally changed in this process, as well as violently and systematically suppressed, it was the religion, but also expressions of Armenian language, culture, and even the personal names of the survivors, whether in private homes, government-run orphanages, or the public sphere, leaving only the biological raw material to be systematically Turkified. This strategy, which has been a common means of destruction in many other demographic engineering projects, would not only mitigate the depopulation from war, deportation, and massacres, but would also offer incentives to mass participation in the genocidal process. This proposal would include plundering of Armenian property as well as near-free access to females and minors. So, Unger explains that ethnic communities had enjoyed a certain degree of security in the Ottoman Empire, but when the empire set out to reform into a sovereign nation state, along the Western model, supported by the European powers, this observes Eastern Anatolia became a laboratory for nationalist visions of the future. So here we can see during the Armenian Genocide not only the process of destruction of the Armenian community, but a process of construction, a construction of new nation, new Turkish nation. After 1915, and in the new republic, nationalist Turkification, assimilation, ethnic cleansing, persecutions, and systematic discrimination continued. Until recently, not only in the nationalist official narrative of the Turkish regime, but also in the academic scholarship and among the general public, the Armenian genocide remained almost non-existent. In the past decade, the public debate on the Armenian genocide has expanded, and the new awareness that the Armenian genocide was a gendered event has developed in Turkey. I can mention the works of Björnland, Altman, and Ekmekçioğlu, Herzog, and so on. Ekmekçioğlu notes that in the Armenian genocide, the Ottoman regime had deliberately created a climate for abduction, where Ottoman Muslims were entitled to incorporate Armenians as well as other ethnic groups into their homes, businesses, and farms. The young Turks tolerated the integration of Armenian women into Muslim society, provided that they no longer lived in a community, but were isolated in their new Muslim environment and certain to lose their ethnic and religious identity. Sarafyan explains that the isolation of Armenian women and children from their communities, their assimilation into Muslim households, the inclusion of Armenian children in state orphanages, and the deportation and execution of Armenian males were all part of the same policy program. Only in the past decade, following the publications of Fatih Zamyanem in 2004, have memoirs emerged in Turkey of Turks, Kurds, Arabs, Caucasians, and other ethnic Muslim groups, discovering that their grandparents More often, the grandmothers were actually Armenian, assimilated into a Muslim household. The growing debate and scholarship on the Armenian genocide as a gender event are certainly to be welcomed. A genocide becomes a feminized event when women are presented as the universal victims of men's inhumanity because of their sex and femininity. Kashyan knows that in Armenian discourse, the Armenians were not inclined to legal abuse Armenian women as heroines, as it was, for example, in a Syrian or Chaldean case. This was a largely nationalist-inspired interpretation. Kashyan argues that Ottoman strategies of forced marriage and maternity proved effective as abused Armenian women and children typically faced rejection by Armenian nationalists. Convinced that forced marriages and prostitution had robbed these women of any sense of national identity, Kashyan explains that nationalists argues that they were lost to the Armenian cause. As for children, a child fathered by a Muslim perpetrator was unworthy of integration into the Armenian community. In the nationalist narrative then, the Armenian heroine of genocide, as Kashyan observes, is the woman who taught her child the Armenian alphabet in the sands of a desert, or the woman who, weapon in hand, defended Urfa against the executioner at the coast of the Lav, or else the one who threw herself into the river Euphrates from a high cliff so as not to fall into the hands of the Turks to be raped. But last academic works of Lerner Ekmekcioglu, by contrast, points at competing narratives within the Armenian patterns of interpretation, stressing that the Armenian Patriarch and the Christian Armenian agencies voices a religious narrative. She emphasizes that the Ottoman Empire had a long-standing tradition of sexual partying with non-Muslim slaves, with the father being identified as the sole creator. Through forced maternity, targeted communities were destroyed, really giving birth to a children of rape, who were expected to then be rejected by the target community, as they were fathered by the perpetrator. Abducted women and children of rape typically find themselves in a difficult position. Abducted women forcibly integrated or imprisoned in their perpetrator's household to survive have often refused to return to their natural community. Trauma, fear, stigma, loss of chastity, children that are not accepted in the natural community, defined by patriarchy, forced conversion, and having no family left, are all motives for not returning. But during the period of armistice, it was exception, and this was a real competition for women and real competition for children, as Lerner Ekmekcioglu shows. So, I'm trying to finish. In the framework of highlighting the gendered narratives as historical sources, we can stress that the nation involved Armenian and Turkish scholarship, women and children are treated as passive beings in need of male protection and guidance, without which they become sahipsiz, kimresiz, or in Armenian anter, without owner, without owner. According to the patrilineal and patrilocal tradition shared by both Christian and Muslim Ottomans, any child, a woman, who automatically belongs to the father's family and his community. That's why this competition during the armistice after the dissolution of Ottoman Empire the competition for women, children was very important for both Turkish and Armenian societies. It is very curious that Turkish official and nationalist historiography claims that this ethnicity-blind policy of incorporation demonstrates that the Ottoman state was benevolent even towards non-Muslims. Rather than a policy of kidnapping, the argument runs this should be seen as a rescue operation. There is no question that many Armenian children evaded certain death thanks to the Muslim families or institutions to which they were transferred. Yet, the precondition for their survival was that they stopped being Armenian, which exposes a motive other than humanitarianism. Another important question for survivors of Armenian genocide or forcibly Islamized Armenians is the problem of their memories, how they socialize and how they transmit their memories. And although generations have passed since the genocide, traumatic family memories seem to persist, and apparently many of these people feel need to fill in the gaps in their self-narratives. The most common interpretations of the forced assimilation of Armenian orphans, forced marriages of Armenian women, and forced conversion of Armenians in general have approached the problem from the perspective of national alienation. The conversions and assimilations are seen as loss of identity and absorption into the other's identity, but sociologically they were constituent aspects of the genocide aimed at the destruction of the most basic social ties of the victim group, kinship. They were also the mechanism of survival. So since 2000 years, since the beginning of this century, the public in Turkey has been going through a period of discovery regarding the fate of Armenians in general and Islamized Armenians in particular. The same problem is in Armenian society. What makes the current moment particularly noteworthy is that it follows more than a century of absolute public silence, and that, in the case of Islamized Armenians, it is the post-memory literature that is shaping the public debate and emerging scholarship. So the stories of Armenian converts who have spent their lives in Muslim families or Muslim towns open up the Pandora's box of gender and national identification for both Turkish and Armenian nationalistic historians and scholars, as well as for scholars of genocide. Who belongs to the nation? Who is an Armenian and who is a Turk? Whose lineage matters? If genocide is defined as the eradication of a racial, cultural, national group, then who qualifies as a survivor in genocide? Are Islamized Armenian women, men, and children survivors of the Armenian genocide? Can we, responding to Hovhannisyan, both consider their survival as an act of resistance? So these questions are very important, and I want to inspire all of you to put questions and to find answers to these questions. And in the end of my speech, I would like to say a few words about I would like to say a few words about the project. That's about the project that's on oral history that we did finished in the project of DVV International, the project where I was involved as an expert. I want to show you the result. Here is Hovhannisyan about the memories. It was the first memories of gendered memories, we can see. This is Nazra Mayri interview with her, and her mother was also forcibly Islamized, and the whole property was legally transferred to her new Muslim husband. And now I'm working on a project of how forcibly Islamization was used as a tool for legally transferring property from Armenians to a new Muslim home. So, and here you can see the result of this DVV project, speaking to one another, a lot of stories, a lot of memories, mush with mush. Thank you.